Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, it is another episode of my reviews on the series Everybody Loves Raymond, trekking through the show one episode at a time. And we're getting to the middle point of Season 7, and now things are going to get interesting with the storyline that's going to be coming up. They'll carry through to the end of the season, and probably, I don't know if it'll be a controversial thought once we get there, but be something interesting about that season finale. Now, this is another episode that I saw first time in syndication without realizing its full context in the greater canon of this show, and that is episode 11 of this season, The Thought That Counts, season 7's Christmas episode. And it is another Ray and Deborah centric one at its heart, because it's showing that even after how many years they've been together, over a decade, when you count their marriage and their relationship, and Ray still does not know what to get her that she will love without asking other people. Now, before I get too far into it, just a reminder, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you just want to do one-off support or a one-off request, go the PayPal route. If you want to continuously support the channel, gain access to videos early, and be able to suggest topics for future videos, such as your top 10 favorite horror movies, or your experience in the movie theaters when you were just a youth, go the Patreon route. Either way, your support is appreciated. This is another Tucker Colley written episode, and by now, whether you're watching along with me here or just randomly watching the episodes, doing a marathon, whatever way you're going through it, by this point you begin to notice when it's one of the writers that writes a show for a long time, as their fingerprints are usually all over it, whether they prefer writing for certain characters, certain scenarios. They're better at keeping continuity with certain things. Like I pointed out some of the weird little ones. Here there's not really too many of that to point out because it's Tucker. He's one of the ones that really knows these characters, especially at this point in the show. It's just that the way all the characters interact, you can definitely tell this is it. Now, as I mentioned, it's a Christmas episode, but there's got to be a catalyst. And the catalyst for this is that Marie's birthday happens. And you know, since Marie's birthday, she's got to make it all about her, but even more so. And what happens is that she gets a gift from her boys. You know, that'd be Ray, Robert, and Frank. And it is these little collectible dolls. And they're very similar, if not identical, to a set that her mother had. And she was hoping that one day she'd inherit them, but they broke because her mother fell into the cabinet that had them when she found out who her daughter was marrying. But now she's happy to have them all, so she's like, oh, thank you all. But then she finds out how much they cost, which is $240, and this is $240 in early 2000s money, so that'd probably be closer, maybe $300 at minimum, probably closer to $500, give or take. Now this starts the whole big blowout here, because Robert's like, wait a minute, that cost that much? You only told us to pay this amount? And it keeps going back and forth. Robert's annoyed by the fact that Ray decided to show up and hog all the glory, which, hold that thought, because that's a phrase he's going to use throughout the rest of the episode. Frank, of course, is Frank. He's trying to blow it off and be like, I just paid what Ray told me to. And I love the line that Marie says when she finds this out. Skimping out on your wife's birthday present. My mother was right to fall down. It's the way she says it so matter-of-factly. It's like, yeah, she's got a point there. She did have a right to fall down. Now the back and forth just keeps going, and Ray trying to put his foot down, you know, I'm doing good. And eventually Marie's like, I don't want these anymore. They should be in a happy home, because every time I'll think of them, I'll think of you all fighting. And Ray makes a point about Marie here that ties into the whole thing that I mentioned at the top of this episode, where even after all their time together, he can't think of something for Deborah, and that is, he always remembered his mother bringing up her mother and these little figurines, and he knew how much they would mean to him, so he went to a lot of antique stores until he, as he puts it, found the little bastards, and he decided this is what she wanted. So think about that. How much time, effort, and thought he put into finding a gift for his mother, and even though at the end she decides she doesn't want them, he's got to go return them. And yet he can't think of something with the same amount of thought, love, and time to get his wife. And that leads to their little argument at the beginning. And even with that, Ray still can't. Because instead of mulling over memories that him and his wife have had, trying to think, okay, what would be a good thing based on the stuff she's told him, interactions they've had in the past, he decides he's going to go talk to someone else, someone that apparently pays a little bit more attention to his own spouse than he does when it comes to this stuff. And that is, he goes and talks to Robert and Amy at Robert's apartment. And they're talking, and some of it is like, oh, yeah, no. As part of it is tied into something she points out that he got her, that he still got the wrong one, so she had to return it, and that is pajamas. I just love the way Ray blows that off when she brings it up, because I know pajamas and all that. Which, the way they just described, it's like, you really have to be that incompetent at buying stuff to not get the right type of pajamas? Which I can understand if you got the closest ones based on a vague description you were given, but if you were given, like, every step along the way, how do you get the wrong ones? And again, that's going to tie into another episode, I believe, next season? Could be the season after that. I believe it's season 8, about intentional incompetence. I know there's another phrase for it that when it comes to relationships that you see sometimes on Reddit where they pretend to be incompetent just to get out of doing something. There's a whole episode here about that. That's going to be a fun thing to talk about. And for relationships, it's a fun one to watch. Now, Robert brings it up. Why don't you just get Deborah a first edition of her favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird? Which, of course, I'm going to be honest here. I have not read To Kill a Mockingbird. I know, someone like me who loves reading, loves delving into literature and all that stuff, has never read To Kill a Mockingbird. And I have a second confession with it. I've never seen the movie either. Even though I know Gregory Peck, as they mentioned in this episode, he won an Oscar for it. And the whole thing about the legal system involving it, and you guys know I'm a crime buff and all that, that yes, it does pay me to admit that I have never seen or read To Kill a Mockingbird. And I'm going to admit it, this was actually my introduction to Kill a Mockingbird, this episode, the first time I saw it. Other than maybe like some vague reference where I couldn't put it together. And even 20 years after seeing this episode, I still have yet to read or watch it. It's on the list, both of them. It's one of those things that I want to read the book first and then watch the movie. It's just the order I would prefer to do it with this one. Now the reason Robert brings it up is because this is the book that Deborah did her college thesis on, and he mentions it's her absolute favorite book. So I'm going to guess is that in conversations in the past, she's brought up how much she loves To Kill a Mockingbird, and that's something that Robert took, like, that's going in the file. Which some people will be like, okay, that's a weird little thing for him to file away. It is, but it makes sense in a way when you see how Robert is. I mean, we've seen from the beginning he kind of did harbor a little bit of a crush on Deborah at first until he saw, like, oh yes, for Raymond. So it makes a little sense. And plus, even with all that, you put that away, he seems to have just become a good friend to his sister-in-law. So he's going to make a little note of something like that, like a good brother-in-law would, and it's something that he's like, there. So he brings it up to Ray, tells him to go with it. Ray gets it, and Deborah loves it when she opens it on Christmas. She's like, oh yeah. But of course, as we've seen time and time throughout this show, and we're going to see in the future, there is an episode next season that's dedicated to this, and it's one of the ones I did watch first run, so that's how I remember it. When you lie, whether it's to a spouse, mother, sibling, to cover up something, you got to add more lies when the original lie is brought up. And we all know it's harder to keep track of lies and keep that going, especially when you're the only one in on it, than it is to just tell the truth and come clean in the first place. And here, Ray's whole story slowly starts to collapse because before he went and talked with Robert and Amy in the little fight scene early on, Ray mentioned to Deborah that he got something thoughtful. She scoffed at it, rightfully so. And he mentioned that they were in the city. You said, oh my God, inspiration hit, and maybe I bought you something. And of course, since he got her To Kill a Mockingbird, she's going to be like, well, what was it that you saw in the city that made you think of To Kill a Mockingbird? Which, valid question, considering that it is such a random buy for Ray to get. It's such a deep dive into her personality, her whole love of stuff, to get her randomly without her even bringing it up. So you could tell that he's just making something up, which I'm surprised Deborah, with how intelligent she is, can't see this, but maybe she's caught in the Christmas high that she's not thinking of it, and if all this hadn't fall apart later, she might have been like, wait a minute, and then talked about Ray later, or maybe she still would have been on the high, because as we see, when it falls apart, it's a day or so later. Oh, Ray really does play it up when he's like, yeah, I almost went with something with Lake Sagata, another deep dive from her past, like, oh, I haven't mentioned that in years. Now, of course, as it goes on, we find out Ray got a little lucky action from this buy. So Ray's like, Robert is the one who decides to blow the secret and does piss Deborah off, as you would expect. But then it starts to collapse onto Robert when Amy points out the rifle thing, like, why does it matter so much to you that Deborah knows that the book was your idea? Of course, Robert goes on the whole glory hog thing, like he mentioned when it came to their mother's birthday. And then it falls apart for Robert because we find out that the book idea was a lot more thoughtful than one he got her for Christmas for Switch tickets to the Ice Capades, which you find out was a Marie suggestion. Which I just love the death glare that Amy gives Robert in this scene. It really fits the tone of the humor here. Monica really does sell it well, and you can tell by this point, like, oh yeah, she definitely fits into the Barone family here. If we hadn't already known that from stuff that happened before, like when she stepped onto the couch to slap Robert in the face back in season 5. But here, yeah, it definitely fits. And of course, the whole going with it. They do make up by the end of it, obviously, and it definitely fits the tone of it, especially when Marie comes in and she's returning gifts, and one of them is a gift that she got from Amy, which is like, ugh. They do all make up. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing for it. You know, there's parts of it, even though I do the brief synopsis and talk about everything, especially moments that I do have to spoil in order to give my thoughts on them. Moments like this, I don't think I should spoil everything beat for beat, but it fits the tone of it, and it is a very Christmassy moment. And of course, the epilogue. Well, just because they make up doesn't mean the boys aren't out of the doghouse, because it's Robert and Ray that go to the Ice Capades. And it's a nice little Christmas epilogue moment. Trivia for this episode. The only interesting one is that we get an Alexandra Romano sighting as a girl in the skating rink at the very end. Of course, we've seen her before. She was a flower girl in the Ray-Deborah wedding episode, and her main role is playing Molly, who is one of Allie's best friends, which is kind of a nice little meta joke there, but it is a nice little thing. And my guess is they were friends on set off camera, so that's why they did it there. Perfect. Of course, she's the daughter of Ray's arch enemy Peggy, who is going to be making an appearance in a couple episodes' time. I don't remember which one specifically. Oh, of course, I don't got the box set right there handy. It's right over there on the couch, so I can't really grab it to look through it. But it's going to be a couple episodes after the next big plot thing, but before the finale. Now, as you could probably tell how I'm gushing over this, this is one of my favorite episodes of this season. It definitely is going to be on the VHS list. If you want to do a compilation of Ray and Deborah-centric episodes, this one is definitely there. Whether you show them in order or not, so they can try to piece it together on their own, it's up to you. But definitely it is a must-watch for it. Now, the next episode is going to be an interesting one, because like this, I first saw it in syndication. And how I've been mentioning off and on about Peter Boyle's health after his heart episodes, you can kind of tell in the later part of the show he's starting to lose his energy level that he had early on. Even if he could still deliver the lines pretty well, you can tell his energy is starting to go. This next episode is going to be the first one where you really start to notice it, and then by the end of the season, it's hard not to notice, and that just carries on through the rest of the show, sadly. And of course, he only lived about a year after the show wrapped, which is sad, but of course, the next episode is going to be one of the first of 2003. It's going to be Grandpa Steals. Ooh. Till next time, guys.